Good morning, everyone. My name is Blake Washington. I'm the State Budget Director. Welcome you all to our Quick Start public meeting. Today I'm joined by a couple of my own colleagues, Matt Howard, Mark Massaroni, and as well as our friends from the legislature. We have David Friedfeld, who's representing the Senate Finance Committee as the Deputy Secretary of the Committee. Forgive me. Philip Fields, the Secretary to the Ways and Means Committee. We have Josh Rissler, Director to the Ways and Means Committee, in the Republican Conference. Sean McKinnon, Senate Minority Conference as well, Senate Finance Committee. We have Maria Doulis, our Deputy Controller from the Office of the State Comptroller's Office. We're also joined by a number of staff here today. We have analysts and economists, all those folks that really put their shoulder into tracking these data throughout the year, informing us, keeping us up to speed on everything we do. So we thank you, the folks in this room and the folks back in our respective offices as well. So today's meeting is a component of the Quick Start budget process. It was instituted as part of the Budget Reform Act of 2007. Many of us were there when it was drafted. I think Philip Fields was the architect. It requires the Division of Budget, the Assembly, the Senate, and the Office of State Comptroller to separately propose revenue and spending estimates for the current and upcoming fiscal year, and then publicly meet to discuss those projections. That's what we're doing today. Following this meeting, we'll post a report on the Division of Budget's website describing our findings and our discussion. The overarching goal of this process is to encourage the enactment of an on-time budget. It seeks to foster a productive dialogue about the difficult choices that policymakers must confront in the upcoming fiscal year and well in advance of the release of the executive budget in January. In recent years, the state has made significant investments in services and programs such as increasing assistance to schools and healthcare providers and adding funding for nearly every area of the state budget. Our finances remain favorable with strong operating results recorded in the first half of fiscal year 25. Tax revenues have been slightly higher than originally projected, driven by strengthened PIT, personal income tax, and our PTET, pass-through entity tax collections. And as a result, our receipts were upwardly revised in our mid-year for the current year and into the out years. These upward revisions reflect a stronger than originally expected labor market. The economic outlook for employment and income have both been revised upward, and strong performance on Wall Street has driven up our forecasts on bonuses, as well, which is an important contributor to the state's income tax receipts. Now, despite these gains in revenues, our out-year budget gaps remain largely unchanged. Spending estimates for all years of the financial plan have been revised upward to reflect things such as principally related to pressures on Medicaid spending. Our enrollment remains elevated in the Medicaid program, which leads to higher utilization. And also, we have some higher cost pressures in the Medicaid program as well, principally related to minimum wage. Our Medicaid program spending is expected to exceed the global cap, which is our statutory construct for spending discipline, by $2.2 billion in 2026, which has implications on our out-year spending gaps. The Division of Budget and our four respective legislative conferences are projecting the U.S. GDP to grow between 2.3 and 2.4% in 2025, following 2.7 to 2.9% in 2024. The Division of Budget and the legislature generally agree that the U.S. economy has likely avoided an economic downturn in the near term. Inflation has eased, and the shift of the Federal Reserve's approach to monetary policy will ease credit conditions and lower the costs associated with borrowing for consumers and businesses alike. And if these trends continue, they'll support additional consumption, investment, and employment growth. We generally agree, the parties in this room generally agree, that the U.S. and New York economies face risks that could shift the economic and fiscal outlook. Those risks are manifold. While the outcome, now that we have the outcome of the presidential election is known, the policy priorities of the incoming administration and the new Congress and their impact on the U.S. economy and the state of New York remain unseen. There are some international risks, including slower levels of global economic growth, volatility in commodities and oil prices, global unrest, wars and military actions throughout the globe. Fluctuations in equity markets also present an outside risk to the state's economy. As we know, we're very much dependent upon Wall Street for the performance of our revenues. There are other uncertainties that could generate risks for the financial plan. The revenue forecasts reflect the strong performance of the financial sector, and bonuses, as I said earlier, will be higher in both 24 than they were in 23. Deviation from our forecast can represent either an upside or a downside of what we're projecting today, of course, which is part and parcel to our jobs. Governor Hochul has taken some steps to mitigate the risks of any economic downturn, and those are things the governor has initiatives she's led with the support of the legislature, and that's directing record high deposits to reserves and our balances to our reserve funds. And so as a result, we do have, the state of New York has $21.6 billion set aside in principal reserves, which is approximately 16% of projected state spending. So what I want to do now is perhaps the Division of Budget pulled together a series of slides encapsulating the discussions that we've had with the fiscal secretaries. We'll do the slide presentation, then we'll hear from all of you as well, and we'll move forward. So jumping right in, I alluded to this before, but the Quick Start budget process, as we know it today, does indeed seek to foster a dialogue between all of us. Let us know what the underpinnings are of this budget. Let us know what we're all seeing. Let us share and discuss the fundamentals of what we're seeing in current law spending, but on the economics globally. We've all submitted separate reports, and the law requires us to to discuss specifically Medicaid, school aid, and public assistance, all of which you have done in the last week or so. We all publish our reports by the 15th. This report of today will be published in accordance of law on the Division of Budget website. So first and foremost, just looking into the future, one metric that we view is, of course, our general fund budget gaps. Again, because we have made a series of long and necessary, we've made investments on things that were well overdue, and as a result, we want to make sure that going into the future, we're able to pay for the very things we care about. We do have general fund spending gaps coming up in every year of our plan period. The cumulative out-year gaps have marginally increased from $13.8 billion to $14.3 billion pursuant to the mid-year update published by the Division of Budget. Spending and receipts reestimates expect a surplus in the current year, and our current year gap was reduced by about $1 billion as a result of our receipt and spending reestimates. The gap in 2027, if you're looking at our chart here, the large gap between the enacted budget and mid-year is largely attributable to our Medicaid program, which again is based upon enrollment and utilization. Our Medicaid, we have more and more people availing themselves of the Medicaid program, and we have some of our programs, in particular managed long-term care, and our minimum wage costs are increasing year over year. The state experienced 2 years of historically high levels of revenue growth in 22 and 23. This is what this chart reveals. And those were driven by pandemic relief, robust capital gains. And in 2024, this is sort of a return to trend, getting us back down to what are sort of baseline level of receipts collections, things that we project in a routine basis. But then moving forward into 25 and 26, you can see upside in growth on receipts, both in our base estimate and then the Division of Budget's mid-year. You can see that in 25 and 26, we have upward growth of $5 billion roughly in each of those years. General fund receipts have been higher than expected, largely driven by personal income tax and PTET, our pass-through entity tax collections. So again, we're looking forward. We've incorporated these revisions accordingly. Our year budget gaps have been reduced by about $1 billion through 2026, including, but our gaps in 2027 will be approximately $6.2 billion, and roughly the same in 2027 at 7.1. So what this chart kind of reveals to all of us that we have a long history of solving for budget gaps. We cannot pass a budget with a large budget gap, and so for many of us that have been around these halls for so many years, you can see the extent to which we've been solving for these things through collaboration, through hard choices, and just through a steadfast focus to our mission to make sure we're balancing a budget and still delivering the things that New Yorkers care about. We have on our spending, when we're looking at our major spending initiatives over the last handful of years, you can see that from 2020 to 2025, the current year budget, our state operating funds have grown by, spending has grown by about $32 billion. And the blue line here represents the sort of projected base spending, and then the increases are the yellow bar accordingly. So we've done a lot of good in the last 5 years. We've invested heavily in the programs that New Yorkers rely upon, but we've done more so in Medicaid and the school aid run in particular. Moving over to 2026, we have, in 2026, we have Medicaid and school aid. They're projected to comprise approximately half, 51% of state spending. Medicaid is projected to grow about 12% year over year, and school aid will grow about 2.8%. The two programs comprise roughly 83% of growth in the upcoming year, expected to grow at 3.8 and $1 billion respectively. DOB's mid-year report noted heightened levels of spending in 2025 related to the Medicaid program, which was solved for by the use of general fund resources. So if you look at our report, you can see that the state of New York provided an additional $1.1 billion in new funding to the Medicaid program at our mid-year period to avoid draconian cuts to the Medicaid programs. But these trend lines will continue into the future with heightened spending in the Medicaid program. Medicaid growth that's supported by state funds is projected to total $35 billion in 2026 for an annual increase of $3.7 billion, or 12%, as I noted earlier. The pandemic enrollment period it peaked in 2023 and has declined during the unwind period, but it has not declined to the levels that we initially expected. So a lot of our spending growth in the Medicaid program is attributable to sort of stubbornly high enrollment in the Medicaid program. It's a good thing to have. It's good that people are receiving the services for themselves and their families, but it's a challenge just on the spending side. We want to make sure that we're still able to accommodate all those costs, and our budget is able to do just that. On to school aid. Spending in school aid 2025 is estimated at $35.9 billion, which was an annual increase of 1.4 or 4.1% over the prior school year. The budget in the current, the 2024 budget provided a 10% increase in state aid and reflected the final year of the phase-in of the foundation aid formula. So you can see the three large bars on this chart. You can see that third year of the large peak was the final funding year of foundation aid. We're now into a more normalized trajectory of funding our public schools. The 2026 increase that we have on this chart above us recognizes that inflation still has an impact on our public school spending, and that in 2026 our rate is will under law increase by $994 million, or roughly 2.8%. And if you look at these charts as well, just under the administration, the President administration, Governor Hochul's, our division of budget, we've invested approximately $10 billion into the school aid run in just 3.5 years. Public assistance, as we all know, is provided to eligible needy families, and it includes that include a minor child through family assistance, and individuals and families who are not eligible for family assistance, such as single adults, childless couples, and families who have exceeded their TANF time limits through safety net. Prior to the COVID pandemic, our public assistance roles were beginning to decline and remained relatively flat through 2022. With the expiration of pandemic-related funding, things such as unemployment insurance benefits, RPA, public assistance caseloads have increased, particularly in the city of New York, and are expected to continue to increase over the course of the financial plan, as revealed in this chart. There's very little variation across the reports of my colleagues sitting here today. Certainly on disbursements, we're all within a range of a really tight range, a very, very infinitesimally small range, $212 million in relative terms. Small when you're looking at a budget of our size, I guess, is in the eye of the beholder. But the differences in all of our projections are really driven by our estimates in school aid, which at this stage are minimal. On to the U.S. economic outlook. The outlook for '24 has improved throughout the year with expanded economic opportunities that have grown beyond our forecasted period, our initial forecast. The U.S. economy appears to have avoided a recession, and growth is expected to continue in the year 2025. As inflation concerns have tempered, the Federal Reserve is lowering interest rates in an effort to encourage consumer spending and business investment, and to support longer economic growth. The economy does not appear to present an immediate risk to the state's revenues in the coming years. When I say not an immediate risk, we don't necessarily we're not projecting recession. We're not projecting any big shocks to the economy itself. Of course, there are broader risk factors that could come to bear. International, global risk factors which will come to bear, but the economy itself at the present stage is chugging along, and that's good news for all. Now, on the employment forecast, our labor market has cooled throughout 2024, and we project that the trend will continue. Growth will slow in 25 and 26. Sustained job losses, however, are not in the forecast. Wage and personal income growth are expected to slow over the current year. New York's unemployment, personal income, and wage growth is expected to slow in 24 and in 25. And as you see over the next two slides, growth in revenue from personal income tax, consumption, and user and business taxes is expected to slow in 2024 and in 2025 as the pace of economic activity slows. On to revenues. The division budget revised our tax receipts by an upward measure of $2.1 billion in the mid-year update, and that's stronger than forecasted employment and wage growth have resulted in higher personal income tax and PTET revenue collections. Estimates of all funds taxes are within a range of $896 million among all parties. The bulk of the variance is found in the estimates of personal income taxes, different forecasting assumptions baked into each one of our respective forecasts. The houses have a bit higher employment growth estimates than the division of budget, which is also contributing to variance in PIT revenues. But nevertheless, all parties will be closely monitoring the receipts related to the end-of-year bonuses and in the coming weeks, and those things are going to be really critical to putting together our upcoming state budget. For 2026 in our revenue comparison, we have We're all within a range again, same kind of fundamentals. Our economic models are slightly different. Our employment numbers are slightly different. There's a variance of about $1 billion between all parties, an upward variance beyond the division of budget. I think we're all cautious. We're going to continue to monitor those data into the next, well, certainly before the executive budget is released and throughout the budget-making process. I mentioned some risks before. I think all these risks are things that are not news to our colleagues in this room. Certainly financial sector bonus payments, they're a risk because they can be higher than, we assume they'll be higher than they were in 2024, but should they be lower, that would obviously have a negative impact on our income tax receipts and the forecasts we provided today. We do have we are highly dependent upon upper income earners to provide for receipts to our
Is the public allowed in here?
to finance our state budget.
Is the public allowed?
Sure.
Yes?
Yeah. Fine. But of course, shifts in economic conditions can affect the liability of these filers and disrupt our revenue forecasts. We do have policy priorities of the upcoming administration. Any number of items can be through a different lens could change. So we have our regulations related, any number of regulations, of course, healthcare policy, immigration, federal spending writ large. All of these things are unknown to all parties in this room, but it's something that we'll all confront as they become known. Federal tax policy, of course, something we've been hearing a lot about in the last handful of months through campaign season in particular, but we know that the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, many of those provisions are to expire in 2025. The Congress is going to have to come together and figure out how to continue those actions, modify those actions, and those have a direct relationship to state tax collections. And of course, global risks. We do have military conflict in several corners of the globe, and that sort of volatility figures prominently in so many of the things that so many of the industries that assist upon which we're dependent for tax receipts in the state of New York. So these risks have been with us for the entire time that we've been doing these budgets. They're not unknown to us in many ways, but I know that it's something we all share, and we'll be watching like hawks and advising our principals accordingly. Last, just thank you all for joining me today. I didn't want to. These findings here, I think, are all in our report that we'll publish on the Division of Budget's website later today. And I know that this discussion that we'll have immediately following my remarks will inform our budget process going forward. So with that, I won't belabor the point, and I would like to then turn over the microphone, if I could, to my colleagues here. Perhaps, David, if you want to start, if you have David Friedfeld from the Senate Finance Majority, do you have any remarks?
Sure. Do I need to tap the mic, or is it? I'm good. Okay. All right, well, thank you very much for convening us here today. I think in all of our reports, we see some relatively positive signs, particularly in comparison to where we were at the enacted budget, and even more so compared to where we were at the time of the executive budget, as far as where revenues are likely to go, along with economics. In your opening remarks, Blake, you mentioned some difficult choices and kind of looking down the list of things that we're going to be facing in the upcoming budget. I think it's a bit of a daunting but exciting list, from foundation aid, the Future of Healthcare Commission recommendations, the MTA capital plan, Cap and Invest coming online, as well as seeing what happens with the MCO tax at the federal level, to see where all of those things kind of land and the impact that they'll have on next year's budget. As you noted, minimal variations in our revenue forecast, which I think shows at least a sign of agreement amongst the parties. Unfortunately, we can't exactly predict the future, even if we all agree on what the future may be. And with that, just thank you for convening us, and looking forward to the next steps.
Thank you. Philip Fields from the State Assembly Ways and Means Committee, any remarks?
For a wonderful presentation that would give us a summary of the current condition of state revenues and various program expenses. The Assembly majority certainly concurs with you in the upward trends as related to estimates in the growth of revenue for the state of New York. And in addition to that, the Assembly majority estimate the tax revenues exceed the presentation in terms of where we are, but still within a range that we can all work with, as you stated earlier. And this is certainly a result of wages and bonuses being a little higher than expected. And also our economic forecast and wages is a little up by a few tenths of a percent above the executive. But overall, we all recognize there's flexibility here, and we all recognize there's additional revenues, which is actually great for the people of the state of New York. At the same time, we have inherent risks, as you stated earlier, to the forecast that would give rise to inflationary pressures, resulting in higher costs of goods and services that would have a great impact on consumers as well as the state of New York. And while we closely agree on the assumptions for Medicaid and education and public assistance, I think that we've all, the staffs and everyone has worked together and we're consistent pretty much, as you mentioned earlier, in that particular regards. And so we look forward to continuing to refine our forecast as we prepare for the upcoming budget year. Thank you very much.
That work continues. Refining our forecast is the word of the day, as we always do. Sean McKinnon from Senate Finance. Any remarks?
I want to specifically thank Blake, you and your team, for putting all of this together. It's the first step in the budget process. So, it's always incredibly informative, I think, looking at the revenue assumptions of all conferences. So that, I think, going forward is important. I want to thank also my staff, Jeff DiGeronimo, Charlie Silverstein, Kevin Gannon, Peter Dreo, all who contributed to our report as far as the estimates go. I think what it shows is we got a long way to go, a lot of work to do, and I think that we look forward to the next step, which is obviously the introduction of the executive budget, and look forward to working with everybody to get to an on-time, balanced budget.
Josh Rissler from Assembly Ways and Means Committee, Minority.
Thank you, everyone. And obviously, thank you for having us here today. We appreciate having the discussion every year, and we agree with many of the points that were brought up today at the presentation and in the presentation. Obviously, as shown, our economic and revenue outlook is strong, and as the numbers confirm. However, as you alluded to, we do have to remain vigilant of the risks that were mentioned in the presentation. Obviously, we are concerned of the trajectory of the state spending and where we're headed with those levels, especially without your budget gaps. But as we move forward, we look forward to collaborating with all of you throughout the upcoming budget season. And thank you again for having us.
Maria Doulis from the Controller's Office. You have some remarks, Chair?
Thank you for convening us here today. Thanks to our colleagues in the legislature for their presentations as well. I just want to summarize the forecast made by the Office of the State Comptroller. We project the state's all-fund tax revenues in the current year will increase by 6.2% to $113.1 billion and will increase by 1.3% in fiscal year 2026. In fiscal year 2027, tax revenues are projected to decline by 1.6% to $112.7 billion. OSC's projection.
$100 and something billion. Here's your Medicaid answer. Stop having these doctors drug our kids. Stop having the doctors make extra money on billing. I'm leaving. Does anyone know what they're doing?
OSC's projections are below the
For real.
projections
There's
in the
your
mid-year
Medicaid
update.
problem. Stop the doctors from overbilling. Have a nice day.
Thanks.
Thank you for letting me attend.
So OSC's projections are close but below the projections in the mid-year update by $532 million in the current year. However, they are higher in both fiscal years 2026 and 2027 by $340 million and $728 million respectively. Our estimates for disbursements are very close to those in the mid-year update. On public assistance, we project slightly higher disbursements of $23 million on an all-funds basis in the current year based on recent trends in caseloads. We do note, however, and we don't cost these out, that there are certain risks associated with savings assumptions in the Medicaid program that may not come to fruition. So our full report is available on our website. It includes these estimates. It includes a detailed discussion of the national economy. I think it's right to say that the post-pandemic economic expansion has been very robust, but as you show, it is projected to slow. And as we see here on your slides and in your presentation, there are any number of factors that could alter that trajectory or disrupt the projections. And so the Comptroller underscores the need for caution and urges that recent efforts to bolster the state's statutory rainy day funds continue. So thanks again for the opportunity. Thanks to all for this conversation, and looking forward to the start of the budget process.
And thank you, everybody, for the timeliness of everybody putting out the reports, obviously putting them on your website, your respective websites, all good stuff. A lot of good collaboration. Before we walk in the room today, our teams worked throughout the last week or so, just making sure we were all very clear on what we were saying. And so it's clear from the discussion today that we're all anticipating continued but slowing growth in our economics and our employment. That'll have some implications for our state's financial plan. We also have risks that we're going to be dealing with jointly in the upcoming years. But nevertheless, we appear to be on a strong financial footing with growth in revenues, and we'll continue to monitor those as we move forward. Fiscal planning in a prudent manner will be necessary in the coming years. As Sean alluded to get an on-time budget, to have a responsible budget is absolutely essential. But I think that we all share the same goals here in delivering a responsible budget, one that New Yorkers can be proud of, one that makes the state of New York more affordable, a little bit safer, and smarter and healthier. All these investments matter to the people that we serve. So thank you very much for being here today. Thank you to the public for joining us. And we look forward, I certainly work on behalf of the governor, look forward to working with you and your principals to adopt this budget in the upcoming year. So thank you.